It's been a while since I've done an actual video, so sit back, relax, we're gonna have a little bit of a discussion about grammar. Hi, my name is Yumi from Yumi the Book Demon, and we are going to be, yes, once again talking about grammar, because I'm having feelings about grammar. The caveat here is that I understand we're going to be talking mainly about English, and English is a very difficult language to master, even for native speakers. The standard English, what we're going to be calling standard, is full of exceptions. There are a lot of rules to understand and to try to remember. It is all very difficult, particularly when it comes to writing. And there's nobody out in the world that has mastered every single form of grammar unless that is literally their specialty. So we'll get a lot of comments like these that I've seen on social media. I don't know how to use a comma, but I got through university just fine. You don't ever need X punctuation, prove me wrong. Grammar is just all subjective anyway. No, there are a number of reasons why, but grammar is necessary. If you're a writer, grammar is imperative, and I'm gonna sort of start to list some reasons. One, grammar is necessary for clear, concise communication, and that is really what writing is all about, is communicating a story, an essay, something to another person without actually speaking to them. So to take commas as an example, honestly my favorite example is this meme. We invited the strippers, JFK, and Stalin, or we invited the strippers, JFK and Stalin. In other words, the strippers' names are JFK and Stalin. There is no judgment. I would absolutely hire them for a party. But these are two different sentences. They are very, very different. We need to understand what you mean. This is why the Oxford comma matters, and I will die on this hill. It is a clarifying comma, and you need it. Otherwise, you end up with something that you probably don't mean. Knowing the rules helps clarify your communication. Even to those who only have a passing understanding of what the grammar signifies, it will make it clear to them what you mean. Another great example of this that is not necessarily the Oxford comma, but it's still commas, is let's eat grandma versus let's eat grandma. One is a great invitation to dinner. Second one is cannibalism. Second reason is that we need long-lasting communication. Generally, over the last 200, 300, 400, 500 years, grammar rules have not changed really significantly, and they're really not likely to change in the future either. At least not so far that the stuff that you're writing now will not have relevance in the future. And what you really want is for someone who picks up your work 50, 100, 150 years from now, maybe, if your writing is circulated that long, you want to be able to communicate with those people effectively. And so, unfortunately, you have to adhere to grammatical structures. And you need to learn how to use your grammar in such a way that it is clear to your current readers as well as anyone who's going to read it in the future. And you might say, oh, but it's a contemporary piece. And that's fine, sure. There are some conventions now that will not be applicable in the future, in which case the reader who understands that is going to look at your work through a historic lens and understand that what you are doing with your grammar is of your time, and so we'll have to look at it in a historical context. Oh, but it's colloquial, and that's still fine. Then they'll have to put on their historic lenses as well as their cultural lenses to read your work, and it will still make sense because you used the conventions of your day and age and in your particular culture or subculture group. It's not meant to be 100% perfect throughout time. It's meant to last as long as possible, and in order to do that, you still have to follow the rules and conventions that you are working with now. You need to know the rules before you break them. Now, I will be the first to admit that I break grammar rules all the time. I have particular feelings about this versus this. And yes, I know some people who follow the UK rules will be like, but that's the correct one. No, it's, again, are you writing in this particular form of English, or are you talking about the other form of English? Because there are many, many forms of English. And technically, I will be wrong. I know it's wrong. And I know it's wrong for this particular reason. The convention says, while I am in a quote, this is the end of this sentence, and thus it has to be on a particular side of the quotation mark. I have particular feelings about this, but I have a reason for it, and I know why it's this way versus this way. I will also, in my writing, sparingly use incomplete sentences, or I will start sentences with and, but, or. These are rules that we're not supposed to break, ever. But I do so sparingly because I know the context in which they are wrong, and I'm breaking them purposefully for either dramatic effect or to highlight some sort of information, and thus I can use the sort of art of the language to make this appropriate. I also think that, things like dangling participles are fine. Literally, one white dude decided that dangling participles were not okay, and and everyone followed suit, then had to twist grammar in order to make sure that there were no dangling participles. I think that's dumb, particularly in a dialogue context, because who cares? So I choose to ignore that. Is it wrong? Technically, yes, but I choose not to because I know the reasons why that exists. That is very different from being completely ignorant and ignoring the rules altogether because you are too lazy to actually learn the rules, or they are difficult and thus you don't learn the rules. I will talk about the exceptions because there have been books, entire novels, that have been written without punctuation that have broken all of the grammar rules, and if you want to attempt that, by all means do. But I will advise you against it because those books were first off written by people who had a mastery of language that, frankly, I will never have. And if you are trying to gain any sort of wisdom out of me, out of this video, you are probably not in a place where you can attempt that in a very serious manner. It is an ungodly level of understanding of language and grammar to be able to ignore it altogether. It can be done, it has been done. I advise against it heavily. Know the rules before you break them. Know the rules before you decide to ignore them entirely. There are ways in which you are going to have to compensate for the lack of rules, the lack of punctuation, the lack of whatever that you are trying to accomplish by not using them. If you don't compensate, it will be a mess and your communication is lost. And I will hear, but dialogue. Yes, spoken language breaks all sorts of grammatical rules, and yes, they should. No one speaks in quote unquote standard English or standard whatever language that you are writing in. We break convention. We have colloquialisms. We have very informal language. It should be that way. And so I'm not going to argue that you should write standard English in dialogue when people don't speak that way. It's unnatural. That is an exception. Absolutely. Don't do it. And I will also hear, but I'm writing in dialect or I'm writing in Creole, and this is where it gets really interesting, I think at least, and it gets honestly very fun. Which brings me to point 4. Even dialects, Creoles, subcultures, they have their own rules and logic that need to be followed, even if it is not standard whatever. It is one of the most interesting lessons that I learned while taking linguistics. I took it at the University of Hawaii, so we were particularly interested in HCE or Hawaiian Creole English. If you have a Creole or if you have a dialect, they will have their own internal logics that are based in other languages or the mix of languages, but they are rules and they are conventions, even if they don't have necessarily a name attached to them. And you have to follow them in order to create a clear understanding to whoever you are speaking to or whoever to you are writing. I am not a HCE speaker. I did not understand the particular wording that was being used as the example, but it was a few words that were strung together and they were done in a different order than what is conventionally known. So all of the native HCE speakers were like, no, professor, it's not that way. And that was the point. It all made sense, but it wasn't quite right. And all of the speakers understood that it wasn't quite right. It evolved to a point where there was a correct way to say this and there was an incorrect way to say this. The English version of this is things like, why is it TikTok and why is it not talk tick? Or why is it the big blue ball and not the blue big ball? You understand what I'm trying to say, but it's not right. While we have rules for this evolution of language now, it was assigned after the fact. We, as a multicultural society, decided that this was the order of vowels. This is the order of description, which, if you are curious, these are the 2 rules assigned. These are the rules for now. Every language, every dialect, every Creole, everything that you are speaking in to communicate to another person is going to have rules, and you need to follow them in order to have clear communication. Otherwise, you risk not only detracting or distracting the reader from what you are trying to say, you run the risk of confusing them to a point where communication can no longer be achieved. Which brings me to my last point of number 5. Language is a living, breathing thing, so you need to respect it. Language, and English in particular, is very alive. The way that we use it, the way that it has crossed borders, the way that other people use it in other languages and mix it in with their own, evolves to a point where, yes, at some point, the language that we speak in 2022 will be outdated to a point where communication will break down. That should not be used as an excuse to not learn the conventions and the rules of today in the context in which you are writing. Your own contemporaries need to communicate with you, and thus you need to adhere to the language conventions and rules of the here and now. Respect the languages that you write in so that you can communicate now. Break all of the rules that you want so long as you know which rules you're breaking for what purpose. Do not avoid learning the grammar rules and conventions because you are lazy, because you don't want to do it, because you think that you can get away with X, Y, and Z. If you are not doing it for a purpose, even if it is simply stylistic or rhythmic changes, you are doing yourself and your writing a disservice. Use your particular knowledge of customs and languages outside of your own in order to embellish your writing. Please to do that. You do need to break some conventions in order to make it art and not just an essay. Just make sure that whatever rules that you are breaking, it is not so much that it is distracting and confusing your reader. Dialects and creoles, vernacular, subculture, language, it is meant to speak to those who understand it, those who live in those languages, because you do live in the language that you speak. And if you don't get those conventions right, it will not come off as being authentic, as being for you. It may come off as false or misleading. You don't want that. So long as you know what you are doing, break anything that you need in order to communicate effectively, even if it does not fit a quote-unquote standard. And that is all I have for today. Hopefully this is not too long. Thank you so much for watching. Please leave a comment down below, hit the like button or the little thumbs up button, whatever it is now. Hit the bell and subscribe if you haven't already for content that will be hopefully better than this. Hopefully also more consistent than this. I know, it's like the end of July. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. All right, bye.
She said it will never go away. I know there is nothing left to say. Can we try to hold on just for now, even if we don't know how to show them what we're all about?